The Jill Miss spirit is within my soul. What video shall I do next? Oh, I'll collect the best women's wrestling figures of 2024. That'll be a good video that'll raise all the joy of the LumberJillville community. What are some of the top 10 best women's figures of the year? There's so many good ones. Okay, Asuka, Zoe. Too many to choose from. Okay, the Katana was not the best. Okay, let's look at the AEW women. Wow. The AEW women's figures are freaking awesome. Saraya. I'm pretty sure when I reviewed this figure, I liked it a lot, but someone commented on my review, and now I can't look at this figure the same. No, this Saraya figure, it looks nothing like Michael Jackson. Nothing whatsoever. I need to let that comment just leave my brain and see this figure for what it is. Maybe she does a little bit. Well, before I make the top 10 best women's wrestling figure video of 2024, I might as well make a video covering some of the worst ones. I
Hello everyone, welcome to LumberJillville. Women's wrestling lives here. Mayor Aaron and I worked on compiling today's list of the worst women's wrestling figures of 2024. So let's get started on these atrocities. At number 8 we have the Lita Monday Night Wars Elite. Boring.
Now, do I think this Monday Night Wars Lita is a terrible figure? I do not. However, I think it is so in average, and I think that's from Mattel really cutting corners and really making questionable decisions on this figure. Now, I get that this figure's attire is based on the night that Lita won her very first women's championship, and that's awesome that we got a figure based off of that historic event. But I think the execution was terrible in my opinion. Now, hear me out. This figure is wearing simple, basic attire, and it is accurate to that night if you blur your eyes and look at this figure. She did have very simple, basic colors going on, so that's good. But the part choices and the design is lazy. If you look at this figure, I get 2010s Mattel Women's Elite vibes, right? And what I mean by that, in the 2010s and the early Mattel WWE lines, the women's elites were very generic with a lot of reused parts, and the attire was just painted on. There wasn't a whole lot of thought process put into a lot of the women's elites. That's what this figure reminds me of. It's very boring, very lazy, and on top of that, the pants are not accurate. They're more Trish Stratus style pants. Now, that would normally get a pass if they didn't already make a Lita Elite years ago that had accurate sculpted pants that were made for her. They were baggier, they had cargo pockets, and they look like what Lita actually wore. These do not look like what Lita actually wore, and that is very head-scratching to me, very frustrating, and honestly, the laziness that went into a figure that represents such a big moment is why it made the list.
At number 7, Lita again with main event series 150. Again.
Oh man, when I first heard that Lita was coming out in a future main event line, thoughts were going crazy in my head. I was thinking, oh, are they going to go with a vintage retro style Lita? Ooh, maybe they're going to go with a modern day Lita. What we got was a freaking re-release. A re-release. And Lita doesn't have that many figures by Mattel. There are a million looks they could have gone with. And they basically gave us a re-release. In a year where we have multiple lines made for re-releases, such as the From the Vault, the Greatest Hits line, in the main event line, we get a re-release. That is terrible. We got this figure previously in a battle pack included with Trish Stratus and an Evolution chair. It was a really cool battle pack. But we don't need this figure twice. We really don't. The main difference here are the hands. The hands are swappable now in the main event line. So now we get her little Hardy Boy hands, you know, the Pope baptizing hands, whatever you want to call them. So we have those now, but it's not a big enough improvement that tells me we re-needed this figure. It's crazy to me. There were so many different looks they could have gone with, and they went with one that we literally already got. Super disappointing. And also, someone in the comments told me that they think this face scan and sculpt looks like Rihanna, and I'm going to be honest with you, I cannot unsee it.
At number 6, Tiffany Stratton main event series 145. At least I think it's supposed to be Tiffany. Who knows?
Wow, so this figure is a perfect example of something I use on my channel from time to time, so bear with me, hear me out. We're going to travel to the future, the far future, where there's wrestling fans that are fans of the current product, and there's a lot of wrestling fans that have a vast knowledge of the history of wrestling, all the way back to the 2020s and 2024 even, and they know about the NXT women's division, they know about the WWE women's division, they know about the history that has been made, and they're going to go to a flea market or whatever is equivalent to that in the future. They're going to find a pile of women's wrestling figures and they're going to say, oh, I studied about Becky Lynch. There's a Becky Lynch figure. Oh, this woman made a big difference. Here's a Rhea Ripley figure. And then they're going to see this figure and they're going to pick it up and go, oh, I have no idea who this is. Because there's no way they're going to guess it's Tiffany Stratton. It looks nothing like Tiffany Stratton. Nothing at all. The face scan and sculpt. Oh my goodness. Not very good. And on top of that, even the hair isn't accurate to what her hair looked like the night that she wore this attire. And let's talk about the attire here because the attire is just painted on. Now here's the thing. Mattel can make some amazing women's main event figures when they choose the proper attires and body part choices and use a good scan and sculpt of the face. We didn't get that here. Okay, starting with the attire. The attire is very complex, very detailed if you look at what it actually looked like on that night. And to translate it to the main event line and just paint it on some generic part choices, it just doesn't work in my opinion. They could have done a Tiffy in jeans and a tight top or something, and that would have worked maybe. But this just doesn't work in my opinion. Now, this was her first figure. Maybe they rushed it out, but I've seen them do a way better job with some other figures that they just rush out. So I don't know what their excuse is here. But at least she did get an Elite, even though, to be honest with you, this figure's body sculpt is more of a better representation of her physique than her Elite. So,
at number 5, Michael Jackson, AEW Unrivaled Series 15.
Listen. I cannot get it out of my head that this Saraya looks like Michael Jackson. I cannot. Someone commented, I cannot unsee it. When I reviewed the figure, I remember I was like, I think it looks kind of like her, right? Not the best. And honestly, there's a lot of problems with this figure. I do think the head is really undersized. You can't really tell from this video, but if you watch my review, it's like a little tiny head on this body. It just doesn't work. I think they could have definitely gotten a better likeness to Saraya or Paige. I mean, if you don't believe me, look at some of Mattel's representations of her and see how good the scans and sculpts are. Now, I'm not being too critical about the line itself because AEW Jazz Wars makes some amazing women's wrestling figures, but in my opinion, this figure is not one of them. Now, one of the biggest flaws of this figure is the jacket that she comes with. So let's cut to a little video clip of me explaining why that jacket is so terrible. All right, so online, I saw a lot of people posting about the, I guess, lack of quality of this jacket that comes with Saraya. So the biggest problem is flaking of the paint. Now, I didn't notice it initially when I had the jacket on the figure, but I took it off, and upon further inspection, if you try bending this jacket, look, it just cracks all over and flakes. If you look at the back here, if you flex this plastic at all, it just flakes, peels back. It's just really a bad design here. I mean, this is a real letdown, and this is an extra jacket. That's why I'm letting it have it here. But yeah, so this jacket definitely makes this figure a little worse than I initially thought, because it's a real big letdown, the quality of how this jacket ended up coming out. It just flakes and chips and ugh.
At number 4, Rhea Ripley Main Event Showdown. Feeble Edition.
So here in LumberJillville, we call this figure Mini Mommy because that's what it is. Now here's the thing. I really don't get too into scale in women's wrestling figures here in LumberJillville because scale has been gone for a while, let's be honest here. The only time that scale becomes an issue to me in my figure reviews and displaying these women's figures is when they're meant to go with another figure and they don't scale with each other. And this Rhea Ripley came with a Dom Dom, and Dom Dom was about twice the size of Rhea. He was a giant compared to this figure. Now, normally I'd be like, well, I'm not keeping the Dom, I'm just keeping the Rhea. So I put the Rhea on my shelf with all the other women to see how that looks. And she's just tiny, thin. You can see it here. Rhea's strong. She has broad shoulders. She has a great physique. And we don't really get that in this figure, and that's disappointing because it's Rhea freaking Ripley. It's one of the biggest stars in the company. Now, I will say, she has some really awesome looking figures coming out, so maybe this was just a misstep. We're just going to step past it. We're going to get through it. It's going to be okay, everybody, because she has an Ultimate Edition coming out. She has some amazing looking elites, so I'm good. I'm fine. Are you good? Fine.
At number 3, Katana Chance Main Event Series 147. No chance any thought went into this figure's creation.
Oh, you want to talk about scale issues? Oh, ho, ho. Let's talk about the worst one. But before we get to that, as you can see here, my Katana is missing a leg from the knee down. And why is that, Mayor Aaron? Why is that? Because Mattel used the same fragile, metallic, plastic that has been a problem amongst toy companies since the 80s. Now, if you're a toy collector of vintage toys, or even watch YouTube videos on vintage toys, you'll come across videos that talk about a very brittle, frail metallic plastic that breaks rather easily. I think that's what they used on this figure because I barely moved her knee and it snapped clean off. So why would they use such a problematic plastic on a figure that's meant to move? And I barely moved it and snapped clean off. So let's forget about that. Let's say you heated up the legs first or you didn't bend it at all. Let's look at the figure for what it is, okay? This figure sucks. I'm looking at it for what it is. This sucks. So I love Katana Chance and Caden Carter, right? Absolutely love them. Katana and Caden are very small in stature. Katana Chance probably has the smallest waist in all the company. So why did they choose literally the worst torso they could have chosen for a Katana Chance figure? Why would they choose that? It makes no sense whatsoever. So if they chose that torso because maybe it was a little smaller, they're going to keep her small. Okay, well, they're going to make the Caden small too, so it goes with her. Nope. The Caden Carter figure is head and shoulders above this Katana Chance. I did a review of them. You'll have to check that out. But these two don't look good together whatsoever, and that's a shame. It's a crying shame, and I've said that before. Scaling doesn't matter. Unless there's figures that are meant to be together, then they better scale properly. These two figures are like peanut butter and jelly. They're supposed to be together. And they look stupid next to each other. They look dumb. They look dumb. This figure was a huge letdown, huge disappointment, and I don't know what they were thinking.
At number 2, Ultimate Female Referee by Figures Toy Company, aka Wish.com version of Aubrey Edwards.
So if you're surprised that Figures Toy Company made my worst women's wrestling figures of 2024 list, raise your hands. Yeah, ain't nobody raising their hands because their figures are freaking terrible. They are horrible. Now, I've said this ever since I reviewed the Taya Valkyrie years ago, and I got it, and I'm like, oh, this looks cool. I'm going to open it up, and I opened it up, and it was literally the worst quality toy I have ever had in my entire life. It was so bad. And this figure is terrible. Now, the only reason it's not number one is because I could see myself, probably never, but you could use this for figure photography because it's a generic female referee, right? We don't have any generic female referees. We have Aubrey Edwards, AEW referee. That's awesome, right? And now we have Angelina Jolie's younger sister here by Figures Toy Company. So that's great. But let's look at the figure itself here. Why does she come only with black glove hands? I get that you want to put on gloves, protect yourself when there's blood in the match, but you go into a match wearing black gloves, then you expect things to be messy right away. It makes no sense why she only comes with black gloves. On top of that, it's weird because that midsection doesn't match the upper body, the chest, and the legs. I think it's the same midsection they used on the men's figures, so they put it on her. It just looks sloppy. It doesn't match up. It doesn't look good. This figure sucks.
At number 1, Ultimate Female Announcer by Figures Toy Company. She's wearing a freaking muumuu.
Oh, that's right. That's right. What in the 1992 dollar store heck is this? Well, I'll tell you what it is. It's another Figures Toy Company figure released this past year, and it is the Ultimate Female Announcer, or you can consider it a backstage interviewer, if you will. And let me tell you something. This right here is the worst figure I have in my collection. Not only does it feels like a dollar store knockoff figure, right? But she's wearing a big rubber muumuu. She is wearing a big rubber muumuu. Big rubber muumuu. Like, what? What? And if you look at this face, Can you imagine if this was a real person they sculpted it after? That'd be terrifying. And I don't want you to say Renee Young. Renee Young's a very beautiful woman. This looks nothing like Renee Young. What it looks like is Nightmares in Jilloween 6, in my opinion. I mean, this figure, woof. I don't understand how this figure came out in 2024, and somehow someone signed off and said, oh, yep, this is an excellent choice for an Ultimate Female Announcer. Ooh, yeah. People can use this in their fig feds. They can display it. She can be interviewing these wrestlers all while wearing a giant rubber muumuu. Woo! Oh, that felt good to get off of my chest. Now, truth being told, I try to find the positive and the good in all women's wrestling figures that I review. I tend to be real lenient on my scoring because I find so much cool and good in these women's wrestling figures. And this past year, there were so many amazing figures that truthfully, this list was very hard to make. It was very hard to find a handful of women's wrestling figures that I thought were pretty bad or had really bad things about them. But here we are, and I got it out of my system. Negativity is out. The bah humbugs, the Scrooge, the Grinch, it is all out of me. We are in the past, so now in the future, I'm going to do a video covering the top 10 best women's wrestling figures of 2024. Now, truthfully, I am waiting until the last second to release that video because I am hoping that Kairi Sane Elite Series 115 makes it to LumberJillville before the end of December, because if it does, she's going to be part of that list, and I think she's definitely going to be up on there. So either way, I appreciate you watching today's video. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already to LumberJillville to get a first look at all future women's wrestling figure reviews and horrific women's wrestling figure videos like today. Now that we got all that negativity behind us, let's focus on the positive. Let's have a great holiday season, and I'm real excited to have some of the content come out that is going to be here this month. So I appreciate you watching. Let me know in the comments what you think, and have a great night, y'all.